Welcome back. Today we're going to do a quick one on the LETSHUOER S12 2024 edition. So this is the golden box that it comes in, or maybe it's copper colored, I'm not sure. But, these are part of LETSHUOER's 8th anniversary package, things that they've done for the fans for their 8th anniversary. The S08 was the first one, and this is another one. So this is the very nice outer box that you get. There's kind of an inner box. We'll push that out of the way. Inside that box, you do get this cool keychain as well. So, it's kind of nice that they are charging quite a bit for this one, but at the same time, they are including some really nice accessories. You do get a tip card with 2 full sets of silicone tips, 1 set of foams. You also get this, commemorative, I'm not sure what they're actually calling this, a keychain or a pendant, or it's kind of an interesting, very nicely detailed piece of jewelry, if that's what you call it. But, it's kind of nice. It's a very nice piece to throw into an IEM that you probably weren't expecting to get. So, yeah, I thought it was actually pretty nice. I'm not sure what I would actually do with it, but it's actually very nice. We'll move that out of the way. This is the inner box, which happens to be black, and inside of this box you get all of these things, and you finally get down to the middle of the box and you get the actual IEMs themselves, which look like this, and this is very much what you are going to receive on the retail. The only thing difference is the serial number. So this is the limited edition, and the serial number is somewhere over here. So these sets that were sent to reviewers just say S12 2024 edition. Those of you who buy at retail will actually get a unique serial number because there's only 2024 sets that are being produced, so you're going to get a more unique one. This is the generic version of it, but same accessories, same cable. It is a very nice, I think this is like a copper-plated modular cable, kind of a variant on, I think, the S12 cable originally in a different color. And you do get their case, which is something they've actually used on a few sets. So all that is very, very nice, and pretty cool that they included all these nice things and accessories for you to enjoy with your S12 limited edition. But when you get down to sound and what really kind of changed, you can kind of see, I thought this graph pretty much illustrates the evolution or the refinement that they've really gone through on the S12 set. So starting with the S12 in blue, and this is Timmy's S12 and S12 Pro, there was essentially a refinement between the two. S12 was kind of a raw, super detailed tech beast, but, it had a lot of kind of a rawness and a really hard edge to it. S12 Pro kind of came along and refined that, made it much easier to listen to. And now we see with the 2024 version, they've essentially refined that again. So this is almost like polishing the same great driver 3 times, and the third time is probably the charm. It is a very, very nice set to listen to. And I said this is going to be a quick one because I don't really have any complaints on this one. I just love listening to it. It is a great planar set, and I love planar sets. And we'll kind of start there. Not everyone likes planar sets. I happen to be someone who does, and that's a bias, right? I think some people may hate all planar sets. Some people love all of them. I tend to love all of them, but it's just a reminder that what I talk about and the things that I love about planar sets, that's sort of my bias, and I love listening to them. And I will probably not talk about a lot of the nitpicks that maybe other people will notice, or really dive into things that turn people off. I want people to try planars as opposed to trying to convince them not to try them. So I tend to be biased in that way, a more positive take on planar drivers. And whether it's S12 2024 version or other ones, I tend to be a little bit nicer on them because I like them. So what is this one? It is the limited edition 2024 version with 2024 units with a great set of accessories for the fans, like I said. So what is it really? It's the best S12 flavor yet, and another refinement on a legendary set. And for those of you who kind of want to skip to the point, is it better than name a planar? Yes, it's probably better than name any other planar that you have or are plan to buy, or that has come out in 2024. Even at $200, it's probably still better than all of them. And going back to the original planars, which all had a set of issues, and then kind of recently we had a lot of 13 millimeter planars, and the 13 millimeter planars had the price advantage, but didn't really add anything to planar text or sound any better than the 14 millimeters that we had previously. So I would say that, generally, I think it's the S12 driver is probably still the number one planar driver that you're going to be able to buy, and this is the best tuning, refinement, flavor of that driver. So yeah, it's going to be very, very difficult for anyone other than LETSHUOER to really refine and come out with a better set other than what exists in the 2024 edition. So, but even MP143, originally when that set came out, you kind of had S12, perhaps a little bit brighter, edgier up here. MP145, I mean, was a little bit down here, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more, kind of easier to listen to. The treble wasn't as much. It sounded a lot more relaxed, not as bright, maybe not as technical, a much easier listen. And so the 2024 edition basically splits the difference between the two. It doesn't quite go down there to the MP145 level, but then again, you don't have a giant shell and a giant nozzle and various tunings on. I'm not even sure what it sounds like today, but yeah, I don't really care about that set so much after they changed it. So I will still say that the 2024 edition on S12 is probably going to be the number one for a while. So, and what was noticeable right away to me is, much better staging because they brought down the treble, polished the harsh edges, but kept the technical edge to it. And that was really the part that I don't think I liked a whole lot on S15 or S8 or S08. They sort of tried to change the tuning in a bit to make S15 maybe more appealing to a wider audience, but sort of lost something in the process. It really wasn't all that engaging. S08, a very basic version of a planar, and neither of those were really a refinement on S12. They were definitely something new. So I think this is the best version of the S12 style tuning that really shows off the highlights of what planar drivers can do, but do it, sort of where they tried to go with those two, but make it more appealing to a wider audience by bringing the treble level down and making it sound more refined and polished. And that's exactly what they did on this 2024 version. So suggested music for this one, I will say go back to your streaming services and look for something that says timeless classics. Anything that ranges, the legendary songs from the 1950s all the way through today's. I think this set handles most genres. Is it good for name a genre? Yes, it is very specialized in speed and articulation. Those of you who are really into vocals, maybe you're into rap and you really like to hear very articulated vocals, it does that very, very well. Maybe you're into rock or metal and you need the speed, it does that very well. It has plenty of bass, it's got hard hitting, nice sub bass. It does tons and tons of genres very, very well. So yeah, I just kind of enjoy going back and listening to those classic songs that you may have heard at the end of movies or on commercials, and the things that really caught your ear from generations that were prior to yours or decades that were prior to yours. And a lot of those older classic songs sound amazing on a set like this, and I thought it was very enjoyable to go back and listen to, even like some of the songs that have been remade. Killing Me Softly, Roberta Flack, right? Song that's been redone a couple times, and to hear the original in her voice, just kind of an amazing playback on a set like this. So yeah, I very much suggest go back to a lot of the original classics. And if you like Taylor Swift or Billie Eilish and you like the 2000s, it's amazing for those as well. But for me, it was going back and listening to the tracks that I haven't heard in a while, and to hear them done on this driver, very, very great experience. So rather than review the S12 again and just say it's been a refined version of that, I do want to step through everything that I kind of missed about planar drivers while I was listening to lots of hybrids lately. 2024 has been a lot of hybrid sets, lots of dual dynamic drivers, lots of 1+4s, 2+4s, all that kind of style. And there are characteristics of those sets which are pretty interesting, but there's also characteristics that planars are much better at, and we'll kind of step through those. These are things that I sort of remembered and started to enjoy as soon as I started listening to this S12 again. But the bass, kind of right away, planars can really do sub bass deep and hit hard at the same time without bloating or booming. Again, this is one of these things that you expect that dual dynamic drivers can really do well, and it comes down to the driver being capable of doing sub bass and mid bass at the same time, and then a tuning that actually hits both. And it's very rare to actually hit a tuning that actually does both really well. the dynamic drivers that can do both, that can actually do sub bass and mid bass, those are kind of hard to find. The ones that have enough speed to have a really tactile impact, there's not that many of them that really do that well. And the ones that are tuned for that do both a nice ratio of sub bass to mid bass, those are even harder to find. So the S12 can really do it effortlessly, even at high levels. For those of you who like EQ, and those of you who have EQ'd planars in the past, this one is sort of different. If you like a ton of bass, you can EQ a ton of bass on a planar, and it will do that just as well, and you will still get a hard-hitting mid bass at the same time. But for those of you who like a really softer style bass, or that's maybe what your tracks tend to do, you can still get a tactile impact, kind of that visceral impact, even at lower volumes, at lower bass levels. Planars are much better at resolving those smaller things and making them sound more realistic. It's a kind of a different experience when you start to hear it again. It's something that's really missing on a lot of U-shape sets, a lot of these hybrids that did the U-shape with a really heavy sub bass, which kind of softened the impact, and then the bottom of the U where they really flatten the level on the mid bass, so there isn't really any impact at all. It's kind of a double negative. It kind of softened it and made it go away and kind of squashed it. So to hear all of that again is sort of glorious on a planar. So yes, planars can do higher levels while still sounding open and airy as well. They don't do that dynamic driver where that really dense dynamic drivers tend to boom and change their texture and really tighten up. And planars never really do that. You can EQ them really high, and you will still maintain this high level of openness and airiness to the bass and textures and all those things. Very hard to, you need a quite high level to make those whether you call it distortion or changing the texture or losing textures or those things that people complain about on dynamic drivers. Planars can do all those things up until a pretty high level. So on the mids, again, you know that planars are really tech beasts and will do textures and resolving way above their price point. This set, absolutely no difference, and even though they raised the price point, it is still going to be competitive at sets at the same price point and above. But perhaps some of that stiffness, I think some of the things that people complain about on planar drivers, when I listened to some of the hybrids recently, to hear those Sonians and that refined edge to it, that sort of softness to the edge to it, the way Sonian does balanced armatures is sort of unique, and that kind of little bit, that tiny nitpick is actually pretty hard to do on a planar. Planar tends to be a little stiffer and a little bit harder on the edge. So yeah, I think it was noticeable that it was different. And again, I love hybrids for that. Planars are just kind of a little bit different. They don't sound quite as organic, but it perhaps is sound a little bit more technical, and especially on the bass, may not beat all dynamic drivers. Those of you who are really into dynamic driver sounds and the air that they move, and that, again, I said that the dynamic drivers are very open and airy, and that's not appealing to everyone. It's appealing to me because that doesn't affect the mids or anything else. It's a very high level of bass without it really intruding or affecting anything else. So I like it, but it may not be for you. But it's really still hard to beat, whether you like a dynamic driver or a planar on the bass, the transition between the bass and the mids, and having the ability to do a full mid bass on a planar without it affecting the mids or anything else is still it's not unique to planars, but it always seems maybe effortless or easier. It always comes out a little bit better, and planars are almost the opposite. They don't really sound all that well if you hollow out the mids. And those planars that tend to hollow out the mids tend to sound too planar, too much planar timbre. They go off natural. On planars, it's almost the opposite. You don't want that U-shaped, hollowed out sound because it'll never sound natural. It'll just sound kind of metallic because of the planar drivers. And those are kind of the trade-offs that we have to deal with today. But on the other end, I think S12, the 2024 version, really fixed that mids to treble. That little bit that I said that actually changed. I think this transition has always been really well done. This has always been a great level of bass. This transition has been always really nice. But this little bit between the mids and into the treble, how the original S12 was a bit harder on that. The S12 Pro refined it, and now we have an even better refinement on that transition and smoothness, and that great transition from mids all the way through treble extension done really, really well on 2024. So, yeah, I love mids. I love the way the bass kind of sits below the mids on the S12s, and this is sort of no different. It's a very well done bass to mids transition. Treble, again, planars are very good at treble resolution, and they will do natural style extension. They will do unnatural style extension. Again, if you are an EQ person and you want to hear as much 16K as you can possibly tolerate, these will do maximum resolution and resolving if you really want to boost that. Those of you who have watched some of my after shows on some of the recent hybrids, you'll sort of realize that there's been this push to do unnatural extension and to really bump out the 16K because of the U-shape, right? Huge sub-bass U-shape that tends to mask out a lot of the upper treble and air, so you tend to bump the air, and you end up with a very resolving set, but it's almost in an unnatural, or those of you who use TWSs for transparency mode, and the ones that are adjustable, you can actually hear more than you would hear naturally. That's sort of what I'm saying, is you sort of bring out parts of recordings that you weren't necessarily meant to hear at a level because there's putting a lot of level out there in the upper treble. But the question on planars is always tuning, right? How bright is it? That was always the S12 issue. S12 Pro kind of fixed it, and now we have another refinement on bringing the treble level down to a point that is going to be very appealing to most people, and that's exactly what they did on 2024. So fortunately, this is the third refinement of getting the balance right, and they did it. This is still a really energetic aspect to it, so at high volume, listeners will sort of notice it, but and again, this is sort of that, when I said it's a kind of halfway between S12 2020 or S12 Pro and MP145. MP145 really got that balance right for a lot of people. S12 Pro, maybe a little bit higher. So now we have something that's kind of right there in the middle. And again, I think they did a really nice job on picking a level that was going to appeal to S12 fans who kind of recognize that level of technical ability and how the treble is presented, but making it just a little bit easier on your ears and more appealing, and I think they really got that right. So does it have planar timbre? And again, this is the third try at reducing it, and it's very good. When you bring down the treble a little bit, it doesn't really, and didn't lose any bass, it does come across as more natural, and it's going to be a lot less noticeable. So will it metal? So yes, I will say this S12 actually does metal quite well. But if you can EQ just a subtle, maybe a -1 dB between the whole upper treble shelf, maybe if you are sensitive to 5K like me, you'll kind of take down 5K 2 dB, then it will metal harder and longer. But planars are always had the speed, and but you need a little bit less trebles to make that a longer session style set. Will it EDM? Yes, it has fantastic extension at both ends. The bass slams, it has a depth, super clear mids. But does it boom? And this is where I say no, it's sort of controlled. And the people who like that U-shaped, really boominess to sub bass, it doesn't really do that. It does a very controlled extension of sub bass. So those of you who like to hear IAMs that go boom, this one is not so much boom as it's a very controlled sub bass extension. So the rumble goes back linearly, and it doesn't have that boom out or bloom out, or however you want to describe that. So on stage, definitely better than nearly all the flat stage planars. And again, that was a very common complaint on many of the recent prior planars going back years. They had a flatness to the stage because they were bright. If you bump up the upper mids too much, the stage tends to flatten in front of you, exactly how lots of planars sounded. And if you load the treble, they tended to expand out and have some depth. And this one is no different, especially the ones with the lack of mid bass. Those ones were very flat. So if you want to add a little bit more back of the headspace on S12 2024, you can lower the treble a little bit. You can bump up to 22 to 400 slightly, and that will give you a little bit of a deeper stage. And we're not really going to do an after show. It doesn't really need an after show, but I did want to just kind of look at it and talk about those two things that I actually did. This is how I listened to S12 2024, and this sub bass, I didn't really touch it. I think it's fine. You can increase it if that's your thing. But I do like I said, I love that little impact that planars do in the mid bass. I love that subtle tactile bit that you can get on the mid bass, even on the smaller, quieter hits. I love the way those sound, a little bit more realistic, a little bit more being there. So I love that little bit. So 2 to 400, I bump that up 1 dB. As I said, 5 dB. If you are sensitive to 5 dB, you listen to metal, you listen to guitars, you listen to instruments that kind of hit that point really hard. I dipped it down 2 dB, but again, that's not really a necessary thing. That's more of a personal issue with me. And the rest of it, as I said, if you're really into high energy music, I would actually dip it 1 dB, but it's a listening volume issue as opposed to they didn't really put too much treble or it's not too bright. It's just more of I listen at a slightly higher volume, so I lower that and it makes it easier to listen to for longer periods of time. There's less of a chance of fatigue if I just lower that 1 dB. But again, these are very, very tiny changes to a very, very nice set. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.